Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. With every conversation, we hope to inspire as many as possible to keep on Dungeon Mastering.
And I'm one of your hosts, DM Derrick.
And I'm your other host, DM Neal, a.k.a. Jote Moniac.
A.k.a. How Not to
There
crap,
we go.
Crap.
Nah, we're leaving it. This is how the intro sounds. Ha ha.
That's going to sound real stupid. Okay. And today, we are really excited to talk to our friend GM Chase, who is a Dungeon Master podcaster and the creative director of Ghostlight Media.
And shout out to DM Trish on the Discord, someone who was actually a DM for this guy, who actually was one of the people that suggested this be a topic we add to the list that we have eventually gotten around to.
But before we jump into the episode, let's read a new 5-star review that we have gotten for the Dungeon Master's Block. This review is from Podchaser, and it is from user MSB667. Great podcast, amazing host and guests. The whole network they have made is great to listen to for all sorts of helpful advice. Thank you so much, MSB667, for your review there on Podchaser. We appreciate it.
Agreed. That's a funnier mental image for me than Podcatcher. It's more aggressive.
Podchaser.
It's more aggressive.
It's someone who chases
way more
them.
aggressive than my guy in overalls with a big butterfly net getting them for me.
Yeah, this is like a podcast bounty hunter who's just hunting them down.
Running them down when they least expect it. Got them! But, dear listener, as you listen to this episode, I may very well be sailing the high seas once again on D20 cruise. And what I have noticed, what I've actually checked before saying these words to confirm that they are true, you can actually put your deposit down for 26 or 27 those cruises, because they will sell out. I know of people who, while on the boat, will purchase the cruise for the next year just to get in on the ground floor. And as soon as I have a code that can save you money, I will mention that on the air.
Ooh, a code.
One of the best things about the code is that the people that run it view things in such an amazing way, in the sense that if I tell you a code, you use it, they chalk up that to their marketing budget, and rather than keep that for themselves, they give it back to the two of us. So yeah, like I said, as soon as I have that code, basically the listeners and I can just split the cost of what they think their marketing budget is to make it a little bit cheaper to go on the cruise.
But Neal, that sounds like a lot of fun. You were just telling me you're going to be running 4 tables all as part of the same game with 3 of the other GMs. Sounds like it's going to be a blast and a half.
We'll only run 4 tables with 1 other GM, and it will be a blast nonetheless.
Oh, well, with all of that out of the way, let us head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meat?
The plate meat's back on the menu, boys.
So today for the meat, it is not every time that I get to say this, but it is someone who I have met in person. Therefore, I have a rough idea of how tall they actually are, which just feels like a weird thing on the internet.
No, that's real, though.
Yeah. Today, GM Chase, who we met at a Catacon, shout out to a Catacon as always, a Dungeon Master, podcaster, and the creative director of Ghostlight Media. Chase, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So Chase, I've heard so much about a Catacon, and it makes me want to go more every year. So I'm heavily considering it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and, I guess you can weave into there how you ended up at a Catacon chatting with Neal.
Yeah. So my name is Chase. I'm based out of Ohio. I've been gaming for on and off for about 15 years, maybe a little bit north of that now, and specifically DMing regularly for about 10 of that. I started with 3.5, and then almost immediately after that, moving to a succession of different homebrew systems. The group I was playing with, that was just the culture for them, was every 6 months to a year, the core DM is going to sit down and basically write a new system. And then everybody's just going to learn it. And that worked well because he could craft the system to the different types of stories that he wanted to tell and talk about. But also, as you can imagine, came with some problems that would go hand in hand with throwing most of everything out and drafting everything every so often like that. So around 2016, 2017, somewhere in there, that group, we made a shift to doing predominantly 5th edition because we wanted something that people could build towards and, make longer lasting characters and have something that everybody could strive for rather than everything basically being bespoke written for each individual character. And then from there, we all just kind of fell in love with the system and how malleable it was with what we wanted to be doing and the stories we wanted to tell at the time. And back in 2018 is when we started moving into the podcasting. Some newer people had come into the group I was with. They were really into the Adventure Zone. I was really into the Adventure Zone. And I said, hey, I've got a degree in kind of this, so let's give it a shot. And that's been, coming, 7-8 years ago now.
I have a lot of questions that we just certainly don't have time for. We have an entire podcast episode that is just you telling the tale that is weaving those different systems together, the pluses, the minuses, the confusion that you must have on a regular basis of what is D&D.
Yeah. Well, look, the fact that I know the rules is just such a boon at this point, because again, like the confusion was a big part of why that shift started to happen. Like I started to like really, it kind of felt like I was pushing a drug, like on the side. It's like, hey, why don't you couple y'all come on over to my place and we're going to try this one system that we can all learn about on our spare time. And it's not just going to, and from there, it just like, it's like, oh, you got some of those systematized rules. You got some of them books.
Like the idea of the struggles that I personally deal with, having started in 2nd edition and going through and just the confusion of
sure.
Like often, and I will say this as a thing, DMs feel free. What I do is like, hey, can I just have your character sheet? Cause I'll look and be like, okay, can you roll one of these? Cause then I know what it's called. Cause I'm looking at your sheet. And I'll hand it back. But the idea of like bespoke rule settings for the individual campaigns, which often speaks to some of the issues that D&D has, that, hey, maybe it's not as good for this, but Blades in the Dark does it better, or Masks does this very differently, or this PTBA, and I get it, but at the same time, wow, every 6 months.
It's impressive.
But you did start to allude to the podcast work, which leads us, it's as if you are doing podcasting and you know how to lead us directly into question number 2. Is there anything that you're working on? And as always, that you can talk about?
Absolutely. So I am the DM, GM, what have you, over on Another Path, which is our D&D 5th edition podcast. That is our flagship show, the one we started out on. First couple of seasons are very much inspired by the Adventure Zone. And of course, as time goes on, things branch out and different tones end up taking place. But yeah, no, we've been doing that since, you see, now I'm looking at that date. I said 2018, or it might actually be 2017. It is, time's a lie. Time's a lie. COVID happened. Who knows how long ago anything is. But no, we've been doing that for many, many years. We are coming up onto the close of our current season. I think we're within a handful of recording sessions, but the guys have proven me wrong before. And then I am also a player on the Imprinted Echoes podcast, which is a cipher system podcast taking place in the world of Numenera, where I play Nehemiah, a protective blade who speaks with a silver tongue, if you know your cipher. And that it has been going on for, I want to say 6 years on that one. It's just a little bit less than what we've been doing for Another Path. But with those 2 shows and a couple of others that have popped up over time, like I said, or as you said earlier, I am the creative director for Ghostlight Media. We are a podcast network based here out of in Northwestern Ohio. A lot of people involved are college friends who genuinely do this for the passion of doing it and putting art into the universe and telling stories. We're all a bunch of theater people. That's how we all came together, and that's why we continue to do this today.
Very cool. All right, Chase, we ask every guest a surprise question. It's also usually a surprise to Neal and I because we come up with it on the spot. But your surprise question today is, number one, what was your very first podcast you ever listened to?
Oh.
And then number two, infinite budget, infinite time. What kind of podcast would you make with infinite budget, infinite time? You know, like the biggest, craziest, whatever, you know, craziest cast, you know, what kind of show would you make?
For sure. So I am going to give an approximate answer for the very first podcast I listened to, because I first discovered podcasts for myself back in, like, I think it was 2005.
Yeah.
Like when I got my first iPod, and when I get a piece of technology, it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to click on every single button, every single folder, figure out. And I found this, like, it was just a music podcast where it's like, hey, we're going to play some indie artists. And I listened to that for like 3 or 4 months. God help me if I could remember anything about it other than what I have told you in this moment.
Yeah.
But I listened to that for a good long while and then fell off. But the one that I really did, like, spend a lot of time listening and re-listening to was the old Penny Arcade comic, where back when, you know, I mean, I think they eventually went back to this format after I kind of fell off on reading them, but it was literally just Mike and Jerry sitting down and recording their creative process for putting together whatever comic that was. And the interesting thing about that is also my introduction to actual play podcasting, because that was around the time 4th edition was coming out, and they played the beginnings of Acquisitions Incorporated, the most underrated of the official source books. Is like, that's where it has its roots, is in those original actual play podcasts that they were doing without knowing that's what they were doing.
So here's the other thing about the surprise question is I'm surprised because I didn't know that was the question. So I have to also answer the question. But mine is very similar because it was 2008 when AC Inc. started putting those out. And now you have all of the live shows. You have that full season they did on the side. You have so many different versions of it. But yeah, that very first one was the basic idea of them pitching, hey, we'd love to just kind of promote 4th edition for you by playing it. Does that work? And they're like, yeah, that does work really, really well. And we're just going to sell out stadiums.
Absolutely.
Now. So,
yeah.
So Derek, where'd you start in podcasting?
Yeah. So my very first podcast, a lot later than both of y'all. My first podcast I ever listened to that I can recall is a show called Flash Forward with Rose Eveleth as the host. And Rose, basically each episode talks about some technology that has either been theorized in sci-fi or by, you know, scientists or researchers or whatever, and talks about what the world would be like if such a technology existed, and how, you know, what good things might come to pass, what bad things, and kind of, she does, they do like a little audio drama-y piece to it too, kind of just for fun, like a scene of this technology existing and being used. The very first episode was in 2015. I feel like I probably started listening in 2016, but the first episode is called A Womb Away from Home, which is, you know, talking about technology potentially existing where humans could be incubated in some sort of artificial womb. Anyway, there's a ton of episodes and it's very sci-fi-y. But yeah, that was my first podcast I ever listened to.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. Okay. Chase, yeah, the big budget.
Mm-hmm. The big budget. The big budget is tricky because, you know, I am, aside from getting like a big fancy set for everything, it's like I have just the money to like pay for myself, to like devote all of my energy towards a campaign. Like, obviously, yeah, I want to go all out and just like, hey, get me a legion of 3D printers and all the time in the world to sit and paint minis. And I will be able to put something on the table on Sunday. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be good, but I'm going to have fun putting it out there the whole time. So that will make it good, hopefully. But at the same time, the other podcast, one that I genuinely would like to do, but would just require me to have more free time, is Campaign Doctor, where I help people talk through problems they are having at their table with their campaign. I have a good friend of mine here in the area where he and we don't see each other at all in the winter, because what we do is we get together in the spring, summer, and fall. We take walks around town and we just talk about our plots, and the other one, like, okay, here's what are they going to do? What's going on here? And we help like pre-work out kinks in the campaigns for each other. And that's a good and fun energy. I'd love to be able to do that more often, but that requires so much logistical work just on the outset there. And I've got enough time to do my show and edit my show and record another show. And I don't think I have it in me to do all of that again.
That's why you'd have the budget to hire, your whole production staff. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that answer, because my friend and he works at the same company as me. So whenever we eat lunch together, this is exactly what we're doing. We're just sitting there shooting the breeze, being like, what's happening in your game? Oh, here's an idea. There's an idea. I love that.
Yes.
That'd be a fun show. Neal.
My Substack, which used to be my website, which still has the same username, thestruggleisneal.com. Like if I were to turn that into a podcast, let's say, the other thing I think is Neal figures it out, where I just have an endless budget to just go do random things. There was a series there was a series where a guy did it in relation to martial arts, where he would go to like wherever like the kind of pinnacle of a certain art was, spend a week learning it straight. Like he'd been training in all sorts of things for many years, but he goes and does that for a week and then fights someone who has trained in that and sees how he does. Another one I've seen is like same basic concept, but like you're going to play drums in a show in a week, but you don't really know how to play drums.
And you just got to cram.
Yeah. And so,
that makes my palms sweat a little
and
bit.
I couldn't be more excited. Like I would just be over the moon to go do, like, have this endless budget, travel to these places, big, small, everywhere in between, and just figure it out. And in that, it's this back and forth, because you go in as a person who knows nothing. So you're going to ask these questions that people of 20, 30 years in a business aren't going to ask because they're so used to it. I literally in college, I had a communications class where for my final, I argued to the teacher that for my final presentation, I was willing to do an improv topic. So you would get to the person before my turn, and then the teacher gave me my topic when they went to go present. And when they were done, it was my turn to present that topic and argue for or against my choice.
Huh.
So I would it's a haunting. I get it. It's a terrifying premise for some people, but endless budget, I'm out. I'm gone. I'm just figuring it out.
I would enjoy that immensely, to watch you do those things.
Yeah.
For me, I've always wanted to write some kind of audio drama. I've made one episode of a kids show that is out there, folks, in the ether. So if you figure out what that show is and you email dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com and you send me the link to the show that I made, I will Venmo you $1. Anyway, but if I had infinite budget, infinite time, could hire the biggest voice actors, or, my friends to do the voice acting and just pay them exorbitant amounts of money, and I could do something like that, I think it would. I've played around with a few ideas, but I think it would be fun to do some kind of audio drama, scripted kind of thing. I have a lot of ideas about what that could look like. I'm not going to drop them here just in case people steal my ideas, because they're obviously very, very lucrative ideas, very worthwhile. So that's my answer.
Sitting on them.
Good answer.
Yeah. Speaking of weird futuristic technologies, like the podcast I was talking about, Flash Forward, what is our topic today, Neal? What are we talking about?
Today we will be talking about anachronisms, and my confidence in saying that was a lot less than when it came out of my mouth, because every time I've typed it to search, I feel like I'm doing it wrong. But anachronisms, basically the idea, the absolute shortest form of that would be like, why is there a gun in my D&D? That's probably the quickest thing about it. And I think there's so much about this topic. Like, we'll get into what we can, but certainly I could see us doing several episodes specifically about anachronisms, because it is something that we all face. And one of the things that like really hurt my brain was the idea that because D&D has celebrated its 50th year, just the pure anachronisms of the systems itself. Like, if you took some of the things that exist in 5th edition and just talked about them like they were normal, to, you know, we're just throwing time travel into it. But like went back to 1st edition and talked about certain things, they would feel like they were anachronisms just by the just sheer time difference between 50 years. And so some of it is just absolute human nature. But when so I've given my like super short pitch for anachronisms, but definitely toss it back to both of you, because I feel like this is one of the more nuanced topics that we've approached.
You could argue a lot about what is and is not an anachronism, right? I feel like, to me, I think about something like Eberron, a setting like Eberron, where it is high tech, but the tech is using magic. I think about like Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Legend of Korra season, where it's kind of like, or you know, not early industrial, but like mid-industrial revolution. You know, they've got cars and electricity and stuff, but it's happening because everyone knows how to wield the elements, and that's kind of what runs their society. So, like, you could argue, to me, that stuff is or is not anachronistic, but I feel like that kind of drills down to the point for me, which is deciding what is and isn't, and deciding what the flavor of your game is, and then how you would try to yes and people asking for specific things and like justifying why they exist and how.
So when we're talking about anachronisms in tabletop RPGs, the one thing I always come back to is Fantasy High from Dimension 20.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, a John Hughes movie just absolutely crashed headlong into Lord of the Rings. And what you get out of that is a blinding, gleeful embrace of how weird and wild the anachronisms can get in that world, particularly because that part of the world they're in is very singular in that manner. If you leave the country that Fantasy High is based out of, you go to like the Elven Lands or to Leviathan, where the pirates are, there is absolutely none of it. It is a traditional high fantasy universe. You're not seeing cars. You're not seeing, you know, crystal cell phone kind of deal.
Right.
It is very much, you know, a more traditional kind of RPG universe. And, you know, I think what it comes back to that idea of flavor and having that that expectation set with the GMs and the players. You know, for Another Path right now, my player Griffin is running an artificer, which means I was going to have to do a lot of embracing of the anachronisms.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Harper has a little, I say little, like, has a steel defender in the shape of a tortoise. Like, that's a little wonky for a traditional fantasy universe. So we are frequently, like, it is a constant conversation of how does Ignis fit into this world?
Yeah, it's almost like verging on steampunk, that kind of thing. But that's really the flavor of the Artificer, to your point. In a D&D sense, to me, I do feel like you could or could not accept an Artificer into your game, depending on kind of the flavor and what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
I obviously would err on the side of, like I said, yes, and like try to accommodate your players and what they want to do. Maybe set expectations early about what they will and won't be able to kind of accomplish. But yeah, it's kind of tricky. I feel like anachronisms, or I feel like D&D in general is, you know, medieval Europe with a little bit of this and that thrown in, and that's kind of the flavor that the base rules go for. And so it's really up to you to decide what does and doesn't feel like it could fit. For instance, you know, flintlock firearms, matchlock firearms really start to become popular like in the late medieval times, 15th century, so like 1400s, They did exist in China, like gunpowder type weapons before that, but they hadn't really spread that far. But, not very accurate, not very useful, kind of like a niche wartime thing. Gun being the classic example, I guess it just depends on the kind of flavor you're going for and making sure that it makes sense, but it's not, going to break anything. I guess that's really what I would try to focus on is like, is this breaking anything? Is this going to ruin subplots or ideas that we're trying to explore?
Sure, absolutely.
I think the other thing that comes to mind is like how persistent is the anachronism that's been presented. So if you say your character is going to be using a gun as their main weapon, like right. I have to address that. Like either that's okay, that's a super prevalent thing, it's just your character, certain aspects of it are going to be very different, very difficult, or we flavor together, how are you capable of doing this? That doesn't make it a big issue, because at the same time, like I don't want to hamper that player for choosing that sort of thing and making it so that everything they do is an extra hassle because they've chosen something that is an anachronism. That said, a lot of the anachronisms that'll filter into a game are jokes. But the question is, how persistent is the thing that's been stated? Because it may not matter in the grand scheme of things, and so you let it slide unless it didn't slide. And then you find out that that's the thing that your players keep going back to. And does that start to shift the tone of the game overall? Or is it something that you kind of have to say, hey, I get it, and that was a funny joke, but like it's kind of, it's kind of breaking whatever system you might have in place. I am trying to think of something.
Yeah, I mean, Critical Role Season 1, you've got Percy with the demon who's influencing him to create the pepper box, which is essentially a gunpowder gun, right? In the grand scheme of things, it's not too overpowered compared to the other players. I mean, they all had kind of crazy stuff there at the end, right? But it's not too overpowered, and the reason he has the access to that knowledge is because he has, given up part of his control, his autonomy to gain it, kind of in a warlock sense. But then, season 2, you've got like the discovery that, oh yeah, actually there was this crazy advanced civilization before any of this existed, and like we are relatively low tech compared to what these people had centuries ago with crazy flying cities and all of this magic. And I feel like that is also a flavor that tends to crop up in D&D a lot, is like the really advanced previous civilization, a la Atlantis or whatever.
Numenera!
Yeah, Numenera. There's tons of stuff like that. And I feel like that can be fun too. Like part of the game is exploring and discovering these new technologies that might seem anachronistic, but aren't because of, whatever reasons you've decided. Like I guess that could be an easy way to kind of allow your players to get the thing that they're looking for. It's like, okay, like be patient with me. It will come up eventually, you will be able to do this thing that you're interested in. But yeah, it's going to, there's going to be a journey first of discovery.
For sure. Like specifically with, again, like going back to Artificer, because all of their cool stuff, the things they get over time, are things they are ostensibly both, as players, people who are controlling the character sheet, but also as characters are constantly working towards. Griffin have asked the question at some point, hey, can I get a gun? It's like, yeah, that is a very reasonable thing for you to ask. And it's like, I've been waiting for it. And so, that is something that Harper is, working on in the background. We'll see if we ever get around to it. But it is one of those things where it's, I feel like you can earn it over time. And the other element of, the other side of this, and again, this specifically works with Artificer, but could genuinely work with any class, is to essentially retrofit some magic into anachronism, maybe as a goof, maybe as just a way so we can explain how this one thing works. The, Stones of Far Speech have had so many different names: Rocky Talkies, Shell Phones, Vox Rocks. Like,
I haven't heard Shell Phones, but that's good.
Shell Phones, yeah. Shell Phones, nice. Real good. I forget where Shell Phones came out of, but, yeah. We've given our group has given them so many names because it's like, this is just how we use this spell, even if it's not 100% how it's spelled out. This is how we all understand it to work. So can we all agree that it's just going to work this way?
Yeah.
And that goes with any number of other spells that have a particularly utility application. Using an anachronism as a storytelling device, just as like okay, we're all agreed in how this is working and what this is looking like. It's effective communication at that point. And maybe does it break the rules of the universe? Maybe a little bit, but it's fun and communication is working. So full send.
Honestly, yeah, I've found that stuff like that makes it just easier to run the game, right? Like we don't have to wait until we can see each other to communicate or have these kind of like miscommunications that ruin plans and make stuff less fun. Yeah.
Yep. Just like Thor taught us, the only difference between magic and science is time. I don't know. Or that's science fiction and science fact is time. Because often, like, because one of the surprise questions we'll ask is, if you could cast a spell in your real life, what would it be? But one of the things you start to think about is like the industrialization of spells and the things that just turn into modern tech. The idea that like I have cure wounds, is that far removed from the idea that the nurse practitioner at the urgent care I go to has cure wounds? I mean, like, is it that far removed or like in the emergency room? It's like, I mean, hey, I was going to bleed out and die. You stopped it. That's cool. Like, hey, great. The same basic concept. Or purify food and drink. And it's like, well, like we have, processes to take things that otherwise would be inedible and making them edible. Is that different? I don't know. Like, and so there's a lot of the industrialization of spells that immediately like can turn into anachronisms.
I have some friends who have a show called Dispel Magic, where they talk about spells and dive deep into what they actually mean and what they could imply for the world. And they did an episode about Magic Mouth and basically how you could like take, I don't know how many rocks, but you could build a computer out of these Magic Mouth rocks and like make it do calculations and stuff. Like you could technically do that with the spell, right? So like this is, I mean, yeah, you could basically take any spell and kind of like really break the world if you thought about how it would change if everyone had access to this kind of thing. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Neal. Like what, in this grand scheme of things, a spell versus technology, like it's kind of hard to separate them out in a game where it's just a lever you can pull, right? It's some mechanical thing you do. You do X, it does Y. Yeah.
Yeah. The other question that I had put out there was, has there been any times that we've butted up against an anachronism that hasn't worked, and how have we addressed that? Most of mine come from names. Like if something gets named something that is inherently like an anachronistic, that's probably the word. Check it. I don't know. I'll Google it and type it wrong. But the idea that like that will just be, and it goes back to my previous point of like, what is the persistence of that? And if it's a character that's with the group, it just is gonna be the thing that comes up all the time. And so like, I have curbed it a couple times just because it's such a perpetual joke that like it can take out of the moment, because that is a character. That's a character involved in the story. It's like, makes me think of the video game cutscene where it's like, it's all the NPCs. And then it's just you looking like a clown because your armor doesn't match over on the side. It kind of makes me think of like that same feeling of like,
yes.
It's like Barthok the Bold. And it's like, oh, here's, I can't even think of anything off the top of my head, but it's just like here's TikTok. The old, like, he likes to give thumbs up. And he likes a lot of things. But he doesn't talk for very long because he's not allowed to, like, and just how many jokes surrounding the idea of TikTok. TikTok got banned from the party for a while. Now he's back. It's okay. But like those, and you're just like, okay, I get it. Character's name is TikTok. And we all got a TikTok. We're all doing our tight five every time we get together about what funny TikTok joke can I make? But is that character important enough that that's probably not going to work, because they are a part of the party. They are a part of this story. They are a part of this world. So that's kind of mine. I curbed it. I'm like,
I do always, not always, but I usually struggle with players who have named their characters goofy names. I know, like, part of gaming is joking around and having fun around the table, and like I like to quote movies and do dumb jokes as much as the next person. But yeah, like when I'm having to role play as serious people in a serious world and address someone as, you know, a Taco Bell menu item, it's not as fun for me. I don't know. It's just, it feels wrong. So I get that for sure.
And we can all clearly hear the laughter and why this is not that easy of a topic to address at the table. Because
no,
it happens to all of us. Yes.
Listen, Cheesy Gordita Crunch, I'm sick of you.
Yeah, just it grinds my gears. Anyway,
that's fair. I apparently I have been very lucky because and maybe this is just who I have ended up playing with, and we all tend to take this maybe a little more seriously even than we should. But I have not had a lot of people come to me with the joke character names. I have not been presented with a Jim Dark Magic yet. And in fact, the call is coming from inside the house, because I am the problem. For the very first episode of Another Path, I had my players going and, finding out what happened to the necromancer Robbie Graves.
Okay, but puns are different than anachronistic. Okay. You know, I feel like puns are more on the side of acceptable to me anyway.
Yeah, but the guy who was giving the quest was Bart Ender, the bartender.
Again,
so
I see no problem here.
Fair enough. Look, I didn't say it was a
Neal
problem.
I say, but I'm fine with it.
Hey, I had a barbarian named Seymour, last name Guts. So I'm not. The call is coming from.
I gotta write that one down,
and we're calling each other inside the house. So
yeah, I don't know. Like one-off throwaway NPCs are like, you know, pun names are usually okay. I've used like, you know, veiled pun names. In fact, I don't think any of my players listen to this anyway, so I can tell you guys. I have like a character that has existed in all of my different worlds, but I like just change his name to a different language. So you know, there's like Jack, and then there's Jacques, and you know, like so on and so forth, and he has existed in all of them, but they don't know that. So you know, it's just kind of a fun little Easter egg for myself.
I love that a lot, but no, like I have been lucky that that is not something I typically have to fight at the table. And if 9 times out of 10, I really honestly, like, I don't think I can remember a time where I had to like actually pull someone aside. Now, if a joke or something like that is being run into the ground, I have a really helpful tool called Reaper that lets me remove it so that I'm the only one who has to hear the audio.
I call mine audition. Well done. Yes. Same.
Yeah. And it's genuinely like, in addition to it being the kindest thing I can do for the listener, it's also the kindest thing I can do for my players as well. Like, it is, because at the end of the day, and everyone who I have talked to in kind of the podcasting sphere has encountered the same thing, where it's like you finish recording, you stand up, you go get a drink of water, and then 80% of what you have just said has just fallen out of your head. My players don't remember what they were joking about 2 weeks ago. So very rarely does somebody get mad at me for cutting a joke. And if anybody does get mad at me, it's like, look, I'm the one who's taking the time to edit it. I get to decide what's funny in this moment.
Yeah, if you want to, you can.
And
take
promise me, man, promise me. Well, and promise me, I'm doing this for your own good. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm doing this, and that is not to denigrate anybody that I do shows with at all. I do it to myself too.
I do it because I love you.
Yes, exactly.
That's
cut
the
because
audio,
we care.
it's the same audio karma I always hope to put in the world.
We cut because
exactly.
we care. That's great.
We cut because we care.
Oh man.
Yeah, on a more positive note, what are some of the ways that we've all used anachronisms that we feel have worked really well? Because there's certainly and there's also like a lot to be said about is it affecting you or is it affecting the table? That's a whole nother can of worms you can get into in those moments. Is it really something that's just bothering you as the person running the game? And that goes all the way back to the point, Chase, you had made earlier, was what are the expectations that have been set by this world? And I think that's another key thing before we get into what it worked well is there will be things you did not expect. Like that's, I mean, I can't count how many times we've said that. So it may just be that it butts up into something you're like, well, hold on. That might not work for this world for these reasons, and being willing to take the time to explain that. But at the same time, they can work just fine all the time.
I feel like the one anachronism that really comes to mind, or not one, but like one kind of trope that I like to lean on is in games in the past, I have usually when they visit a new town and find a new tavern, I put some kind of weird tavern game in there to give them something to do at the tavern and, you know, make a few rolls and see if they can succeed or not. That's usually like kind of out of place. For instance, I did one where there's like, you know, it's like a beach themed pub. And so there's this surf board that you like ride on and attempt to balance on, almost like a mechanical bull, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's like one that my players love to do because they loved hopping on and trying to like balance and set the record, you know, by rolling the highest acrobatics roll or whatever to stay on this thing and like get their name on the wall as the record holder. So, you know, I'm sure you could explain away how it would work, but I didn't like take any time to. It was just like, yeah, there's this surfboard that you have to balance on and it moves around a lot. Not something that probably existed as often, but it was just kind of something fun to throw away. And so then it became like okay, what can I come up with for the next tavern in the next town? Because that's like the first thing they do is they go to the tavern and see what weird game I've cooked up for them to try to compete with each other at, and you know, score some points just for fun to blow off some steam. So yeah, that's one that I've leaned on that seems to work well, but isn't like world breaking. You know, it's not like, okay, well, now we got to figure out who invented this and go talk to them and invest in the business. And, you know, it's, you know, it hasn't derailed anything yet. It's just been kind of a fun, you know, 10-minute throwaway thing.
Nice.
One I had because it was a game with my kids, and I guess part of the anachronism is I had to navigate my son asking what are brewer's supplies, and he's 8. And so I had to just navigate that quickly. I was like, oh, you make drinks. Not wrong. And he was in a desert. And so I was like, oh, you can make cactus coolers. Because I thought that was funny. And he's completely unaware. But the guy who got me into D&D is also at the table. And he realized what the potential of this anachronism could be. And at the next session, brought cactus coolers and just blew my child's mind right out of his head. He's like, what just happened? They're real and they're at the table. So that was definitely a positive anachronism that was used. And in my home game, there's one that like, it's there and it's working. And I am concerned about its long-term effects because of how persistent I chose to make it. One character was from Eberron, and they figured out how, like, and they're the thief, and it's the mark of travel. So like they go back to Eberron into the Mournland for a little bit and bring back a busted Warforged Colossus. And so now they're trying to figure out, but they bring it back to the town that they've kind of taken over because they're higher level now. So it's there at the town, but the town doesn't see a lot of people that don't. So it's not affecting the world yet. If they figure out how to make it get up and go again, I got a lot of stuff that I got to figure out. But at the same time, if they've spent that much effort on it, okay, fine. Like, yeah. I'll allow it because I allowed it initially. And if you really want to invest that much time and effort, then it says, okay, that's what's changing the world. You're choosing they, as much as myself, are allowing that anachronism to change what's happening and the existence of things inside of the world that we're playing. And I am terrified, but that's fine.
I don't mean to derail, but Chase, have you had Cactus Cooler before? Do you know what this is?
I have not. In fact, you may have caught the light flashing on my screen as I Googled Cactus Cooler.
I did.
Yeah, I Googled it too. It seems like it might only be in the Western.
Oh no!
Southwest
Oh really?
US.
Oh my bad.
So I knew
that's
what it
cool.
was.
Okay.
Because I was like, oh, I love
Yeah,
Cactus Cooler, but I was
delicious.
like, I wonder if that's a regional thing.
Yeah, that is deeply regional, and the only time I have been to the West Coast has been to the Pacific Northwest. Furthest south I've gotten was Mount Shasta.
Mount Shasta,
which is
of soft drinks.
Mount Shasta. Yeah, exactly. I went to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival with my wife a couple of years back,
All right.
and it's like, hey, neither of us have been to California. We should technically go to California. So yeah, but yeah, no Cactus Cooler. I mean, it looks great.
Oh, it
sounds good. I am looking at an Amazon order page right now, and I'm not gonna do it because it is $22. But
you know what? A Catacon?
Mm-hmm.
We could bring you some Cactus Cooler.
You know what? I will not say no to that. I will possibly forget between now and then, which will make that moment way funnier.
Have a can and you'll be like, what is this?
For me, it's a grocery outlet. I could probably get a 12-pack for $5 or something. So
Yep.
Incredible. Anachronisms. There's two that stand out for me that I have put into my game that my players have really enjoyed, which is my marker for success. If characters enjoy it, and if the Discord seems to be enjoying things after, it's like, okay, I've made something entertaining, so we're good there. But the first one was back from, I think, season 3, so the end of my first campaign arc of Another Path. My Zach, who was playing our warlock, he was a warlock to the deep, which is essentially the expression of the source code of this world in the form of a warlock patron. So all of the warlocky powers had a hint of anachronism, a hint of tech to it. And that was kind of capstoned by when he eventually became the high priest effectively for this pseudo deity. He gained, eventually was able to get access to a unique ability for him specifically called Concordance, which was a text chat between him and the other two members of the party at all times.
Nice.
So I basically gave them a little Discord channel that they could constantly talk back and forth on, even when they were separated as a party.
Cool.
And then in this season, I did have a multiple episode arc where they were going through a theme park that was being built by a Fae patron and a artificer. And eventually they came across these wandering magicatronics, and I did a little Five Nights at Freddy's thing where they got to fight a bunch of magic themed robots about, who all had vastly different abilities based on what the artificer was making them to be. And that was it silly and goofy and a really weird way to spend a couple of episodes? Yes, absolutely. But everybody had fun. I got to do a little bit of a horror arc, which you don't get to do a whole lot of in D&D outside of Barovia or something like that, or abject body horror. And so it was a way to blend in. This is not the typical type of tone we go for, but this serves the story. We're all having fun. Everyone's going to get a level at the end of this. We're all having a great time.
Yeah, that is fun. Especially when you're doing stuff for an audience. I feel like there is more of a motivation to kind of switch stuff up, here and there and do a little arc, because, that's kind of how you're trying to tell the story anyway. You're trying to break it up into interesting arcs. Whereas a home game probably, I don't know, in my experience, it's always a lot more just kind of free form, free flowing, whatever is happening is happening. So that is pretty cool, though. I do like the idea of animatronics, kind of like spooky carnival vibes, crazy stuff coming alive. That is fun.
Yeah. Now, Five Nights at Freddy, I was well past that age, where it was very, very interesting to a lot of people when it first came out. But as a former Chuck E. Cheese employee, that that series holds a very special place for me as someone who's been in the building after the lights go off. And yeah, it's that creepy.
Which is only marginally darker than when the lights are already on. From every Chuck E. Cheese I've ever been, I'm like, we really skimped out on the lights here, everybody. Why is it so dark in here? Oh.
No, you see, by the time I got there, it was the full. So we're talking winter of 2006 was when my location opened, and I was on the opening team. And they had gone full rat casino, but like modern Vegas casino where it's all very brightly lit.
Oh, okay.
The fluorescents are pumping. The rat and his cronies are singing. And I am putting on the most obnoxious suit I'll wear in my life.
Nice.
Respect, honestly. Anyone who's done terrible jobs like that, I respect. I worked in the food industry, never at Chuck E. Cheese, but like being at restaurants. Oh my gosh!
No, the darkest truth is that Chuck E. Cheese is far from the worst place I've worked.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, scathing indictment of a certain country club I will not name.
Oh, country club? Okay. Yeah, I could see that. That could be dark for a different reason.
Rules,
anyway.
Rules.
I feel like the other funny kind of side of Anachronisms is like real life existing organizations or governments or that kind of thing. Like when we make jokes about taxes, or like bureaucracies, that kind of stuff. Like, bureaucracies have existed for a while and government structures, but like, making jokes about preparing your tax returns or I don't know, that kind of stuff is just kind of like adult goofs. Adult jokes to me. So
the bank quest in Witcher 3.
Right. It's just, so I feel like those usually work pretty well too, even if they're just one-off jokes.
So one of the sections that we always love shouting out is our homework section. It's anything that people could read, could listen to, could watch for some examples on how to do anachronisms. Probably one of the few times where I am going to immediately give an example of how not to do them. Which is rare for me. But I hate watched all of Gotham and they didn't know what they were doing. All technology was based on the speed of plot. There were points where they were using cell phones and then a few episodes later, the villain is like getting everybody when they're listening to the AM radio. And I'm like, ooh, what? They just had cell phones. And like, now nobody has cell phones. And so like, oh no, don't listen to the radio. I would just call someone and tell them not to do it. But apparently that's no longer an available option for me. So yeah, Gotham, not a good example. That said, one of the ones that came to mind that always sticks out to me because they just gloss over the tech that shows up is Naruto, where sometimes they'll have it, sometimes they won't. Some things feel fairly modern, others feel very feudal, but at the same time, what they do is not that different than magic, and so it just all kind of just mixes in a way that just exists in their world, and that just is what it is. So those are kind of the two that stood out. Oh, I have others, but A Knight's Tale.
A Knight's Tale, yeah, especially for the music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess a similar bucket to that, specifically when it comes to music, is BioShock Infinite. Because they had all of the music in there are anachronistic songs redone by, I believe, the Postmodern Jukebox band, which all they do is make, take modern songs and put it into, timed styles, which are incredible. Their cover of Creep is one of the best pieces of music out there. The example that's coming to mind is not a great example, but I've been buried in these books for about 3 months now, so that's where my head is at, is the Dungeon Crawler Carl books.
Oh, yeah.
Which I don't want to give too much away because a hearty recommendation. They start off as like goofy, silly fun, and over time become incredibly heart-wrenching discussions with themes of infertility, drug abuse, and all of this other very, very heavy stuff, while also still being very funny books.
This is like the lit RPG stuff, right?
Yeah. I had somebody at work recommended it to me as specifically as very good audiobooks. The team they've got working on that is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, if you are at all an audiobook person and you don't mind Amazon, because unfortunately it is an Amazon exclusive right now, 10 out of 10 books in any case. But yeah, that's the example that's living in my head, because we've talked about Legend of Korra, which is the other really, really good one, especially in talking about the industrialization of magic. You can't talk about Korra without that being a huge theme of that.
Yeah, I'm gonna bail myself out and say that's my example. And I think Fantasy High, which you mentioned earlier, Chase, is also a good example of doing it. Like, it's very hand wavy because, you know, inherently Dropout is just so good at, like, all of the people who make content, and all of their talent is so good at, like, working together, telling an interesting story and not focusing on stupid stuff. Like, they don't focus at all on, like, the anachronisms. They just accept it and go with it and like, you know, live in the world.
Yes, and.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they're all trained improvisers, so they're good at that kind of stuff. Yeah, I feel like Fantasy High is a good one. A lot of the Dropout stuff is kind of like that. But yeah, Korra is good too. And, you know, like one of the main characters like goes and works in the factory as a firebender, you know, like firebending to make the city run, which is, it's just funny to think about. Like, you know, 500 years ago, you would be revered in your village, and you'd get to train, and, you know, you might like fight in tournaments, or you become a soldier. And like now it's just like, nah, you just work in the power plant like everybody else.
You got to put in a shift at the lightning factory.
Yeah. It's just so funny to me.
That's the dark version of every time we ask about the spells and just like the industrialization and the not fun side of that, of like, I got to go clock in for my 8 hours of purified food and drink. See you when I get home, honey. I haven't been able to learn larger spells, so I just got my dead end job here.
Which is why you take prestidigitation. Super useful, and no one asks anything of you.
You're just a cantripper for life.
I am a personal, avowed lover of a cantrip. If I get extra spells as a bard, I would always put them as more cantrips. It's like, cool, this is just more magic I can constantly do with no repercussion.
Just a bunch of random
What's
weird
wrong
stuff.
with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, it would almost be really funny to do a one shot where all of you have mundane jobs based on the spells, you know, and like, you know, finding adventure in your postmodern urban hellscape, you know. Anyway.
I got mage hand. I'm stocking shelves.
Yeah. Exactly. Stuff like that.
I can reach the really tall shelves.
Yeah.
Why are they putting stuff up there? No one can reach.
Oh my gosh. I was actually on an episode of the show Dispel Magic, and I chose, what did I choose? It was a cleric spell. Was it I think I chose what's the one where they create the aura and you have to tell the truth inside of it?
Oh, Zone of Truth.
Zone of Truth.
Yes, it was Zone of Truth, and like the implications on the legal system, like you just have all of these clerics who just like work in the courtroom, Zone of Truthing everybody, so you get the absolute truth of what happened. And like people would get trained to like try to trick the system. Like, could you buy out the clerics? Okay, well, if the clerics can be bought, then we would have to have 3 different clerics who don't talk to each other, who don't know each other, so they can't be bought. And like, could you have magic mouths on your body to like trigger and answer the lawyer's questions? So it's like stuff that you said previously, so it's not breaking Zone of, I don't know, there's just so many layers you can make on stuff like this. Oh man, the bureaucracy would just be unending, basically, if everyone could have access to these spells. Like, society would be awful. It'd be crazy.
My two other examples is because you mentioned audiobooks that brought to mind. Nick Offerman reads A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which is basically like just anachronism from start to finish, because the main character travels back in time and just abuses the information that he carried with him to just take over.
I remember us talking about this, Neal, like it's one of the first isekai stories.
And I was going to say isekai is literally just, it's anachronism because you're going from one place to another with the knowledge of the first. So yeah, any isekai is probably going to give you some examples of anachronisms.
The Dungeon Crawler Carl books are that, basically, right? He gets transported to some other place.
Sort of. So to spoil the first like chapter and a half, Carl is, up late one night and his ex-girlfriend's cat escapes from the apartment. He runs out after it. And the moment he steps outside, every single structure on the planet Earth is immediately flattened. There is instructions like, hey, you have an hour to get into the dungeon. No explanation of what the dungeon is. Anybody who's left up topside is on their own. And so Carl runs for the dungeon, and it turns out Earth has been slated for destruction for years and years and years and years by aliens. And anybody who goes into the dungeon is now on the most widely watched TV show across the galaxy. And he now has to go through multiple, like, very specifically high fantasy themed levels in order to try and survive and rule what is left of the Earth. So it is Hunger Games meets Battle Royale meets Survivor.
Yeah.
But with a very explicit RPG, like high fantasy RPG overlay on everything. Like the people who are running this season are like, their culture is really into high fantasy. So this is a high fantasy year. So
it's like Truman
you've got
Show and The Running Man, like just like
yes,
weird mishmash. I like it though. That's hilarious. I gotta.
And you talk about like exploring the depths of that. It's like, okay, what does it mean? Okay, all of the like support staff for the show has actually been stationed on Earth for decades, watching all of the media, getting an understanding of the culture, so that when they inevitably get paired with people, they are able to have a reasonable conversation with him. It's like, okay, here's the situation. Sorry about it. This is the closest thing I can explain it to you, but at least I have seen all of Ally McBeal.
Nice.
Like, it is an utterly bizarre read, but like the anachronism, like that is I described Fantasy High as being embracing the anachronism. This is riding the anachronism all the way to the bank. Like the artifice itself is the anachronism, and we're here for the whole thing.
That's fun. All right. To close stuff out, Chase, we would love to know, the listeners would love to know where they can find you, where they can find your musings, and where they can find the cool stuff that you make.
Mm-hmm. I am TQ Loudly in most places, including Blue Sky, which is where I am predominantly, though the X account is still active. I don't hop on there as much anymore. But yeah, you can find me at tqloudly.com over on Blue Sky. You can also find me at tqloudly.com, where I've got my link tree that points to Another Path, of which I am the DM, Imprinted Echoes, of which I am a player, and Ghostlight Media, which I oversee and help my friends create cool art. We have a bunch of different shows. If you, we are theater people, so we do have a theater news podcast called By the Ghostlight. If you're looking for another TTRPG, we also have The Silent Secrets, which is about to enter into its third season, which is a Monster Hearts 2 show. And we also have Zach and Griffin's Multiversal Pet Shop, which is an improv comedy podcast about, hey, would this D&D monster or sundry fantasy creature make for a good pet? The answer is usually no. They're too big.
Surprise.
That does sound pretty fun, though.
But yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on. This was awesome.
Absolutely. And we'll have to see if we can convince you to get us on one of those shows. And we'll just talk in circles.
Absolutely.
We just want to thank Chase again for coming on, spending some time with us, telling us about the anachronisms that he has experienced and some of the ways that we can get around them or fold them into our own stories.
If you would like to tell us about some of your favorite or least favorite anachronisms that have popped up in your games, go ahead and shoot us an email at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com or hit us up on one of our various social medias, usually at DMS_block.
And whether you got a pod chaser or a podcatcher, head over there and leave us a rating and review, because word on the street is it's very helpful.
And we'll read it live on our next episode.
I have a pod assassin. And as always, the block party, god dang, it's been a while since I made this mistake. And as always, the Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network.
You can check out other awesome Block Party Podcast Network shows like The Bad Venture Club, Knocked Prone, The Titans of Altera, Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, and more.
And as always, we want to thank you for listening to the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing gods,
killing characters with lightsabers,
and lowering the egos
because it's an anachronism. Get it?
All the people at the table. I like it. I want a lightsaber. What's that from? That's definitely from something.
It's from everything. I don't know. I've already used it, but I'm going to use it again. I'm DM Derrick. Where we're going, we don't need roads.
I'm DM Neal. Good night, good luck, and keep on dungeon mastering.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
So there's this one time where I was playing a game, and then because the book that my dungeon master was reading, he just arbitrarily decided that we weren't going to be in medieval times anymore. We were just in modern times, and my dumb character was just staring down the literal barrel of a gun because it didn't know what it was. Not a fan.
That seems like a really bad move.
Goodbye.